pleasure to meet you. Steve Miller Band.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah. Guilty as charged.
Guilty as charged. So, veteran here of rock and roll, right?
Yeah, I've been around. I'm a classic rock by a classic rocker.
Can you share with us some experiences? You've been toured and you've been all around the world, or anything that stands out?
Well, I mean, basically, I started off. Actually, Mario, who's our bass player here, and I went out with Van Morrison back in the early '70s, and that was, I think, the first tour I ever did. So that's kind of how I got my feet wet. And then I went out with a band called Hot Tuna, that was a spin-off from the Jefferson Airplane, and I was with a band called Terry and the Pirates that was kind of a local Marin County band here of just, buddies who we got together and just played music for the fun of it. And the bass player was working with Steve Miller. And he had written some really goofy words. It sounded like Dr. Seuss on LSD.
Can you let us know some of those lyrics?
Well, you probably know them. I met you on somebody's island. Okay. I thought you had known. Yeah. So, and I had a tune that had been sitting in my back pocket for years, and we put them together, and it became Jungle Love. And Steve heard it, he loved it, and he ended up doing it on the Book of Dreams album. And when I wrote the guitar part, I did it in a tuning that was not normal. It was like some real esoteric, weird blues tuning. And Steve couldn't figure out the guitar part, thank God. And he had to have me come in and do it. And then I ended up going down and doing a promotional film. And the night after we did the promotional film, he asked me to join the band.
Steve Miller.
Yeah.
Steve Miller, folks.
Steve Miller, yeah.
Oh,
so that was.
Then on. What year was that?
That was in 1977. And that was my big Hollywood break. It was just like in the movies, man. Yeah.
Wow.
You want to join a band, kid, and be a star? And it was great because "Rockin' Me" was the #1 song in the nation at that point. So it was truly a big dream break.
Most memorable moment with the Steve Miller Band?
The most memorable moment with the Steve Miller Band was splitting my pants in front of 10,000 people at the LA Forum. I remember it was the end of Jungle Love, and I used to do this thing where I'd jump up in the air and I'd land on my knees and do the whole rock star thing. Except the back of my pants split and my ass was hanging out in front of 10,000 people. So it was one of those moments. It was the best of worlds because I had 10,000 people screaming for me, and on the other hand, my little white butt cheeks were hanging out. So I was like, well, what do I do about this? So we had a road guy come in and stuff some rags in the back of my pants, and not too many people knew, but that was definitely a memorable moment. Yes. Yeah. Yes.
And a few interesting folks you met along the way?
I met a lot of it. I've met so many interesting people. I mean, just hanging out with Steve was a trip, and all the guys in his band were amazing. I got to hang out with Joe Walsh. Ended up working. Actually, I met Bill Walton, who was a basketball player, big-time basketball player from the 70s, and used to hang out with him. And over the years, I've got a lot of friends from the music business. Tommy Johnston from the Doobie Brothers. I worked with him for a while. We're still friends. It's just a lot of great people over the years. It's been a dream life.
Wow, great people here, right? You're here with.
I'm here with
Lee Stevens.
Lee Stevens from Blue Cheer. I was a big fan back in the '60s. Loved his stuff, and it's just honored to be working with the guy. And Mario Cipollina, of course, I've known him since he was, 4 feet tall.
How did this come about? You guys here harmonizing together, getting ready for tomorrow, right? Summer of Love event? How did you guys...
Mike Somavia, our buddy over here, also known as Fan Man, has a way of orchestrating these things. He puts people together. Come on, Mike. Take a bow.
Introduce
this
yourself,
is Mike.
Hi, I'm Mike Somavella, a.k.a. Fan Man. Been a friend of Greg since 1985 and a friend of Lee's for about 15 years. And, I'm just musical Svengali, I guess you could say.
You organized this. This is amazing.
I would organize this band, and I also am working on one of the promoters of the event itself. And I've signed Greg to a couple record deals for old bands he played in back in the 60s and 70s, and the music languished in the vaults somewhere, and I came along and said, hey, let's put this out, and found labels in Europe to put it out. So it's kind of a blessing to work with one's musical heroes.
Oh,
and be a part of this music scene. And I've been listening to Blue Cheer since I was 10 years old, and I'm not going to say how old I am right now, but...
Mike's 12, so...
Well, I just actually turned 50 and celebrated my 20th year of working in the Bay Area.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Amazing.
Thank you.
I'm going to take my hand off your shoulder because people are going to start talking.
No, we can't have that happen.
We can't have that happen. So, yeah, Mike is a facilitator because, musicians tend to be notoriously lazy, and we need people like Mike around to bring us together. And, I've been a fan of Lee's for years, and it's just, it's such a pleasure to finally be working with him. And, Mario, I've done like a number of projects over the years. Mario and I have been working in another project called The Monsters of Classic Rock.
Let us know a little bit more about that.
That, it's kind of a revolving door band, but, it's kind of whoever's available. But we've been using Mario on bass, Joey Mullen from Badfinger on the second guitar, Chris Slade from AC/DC on drums, Carmine Appice comes in on drums from time to time. And, of course, there's, I knew it. That rascal Mario. And that's real exciting because we just, we get to do all the hits. We get to do the Huey Lewis stuff and the Steve Miller stuff, the Badfinger stuff, and, of course, the AC/DC stuff. So, plus I teach back in the San Diego area. I've got about 50 to 60 students a week that I work with. Kids of all ages, kids from 7 to 70.
You work with kids, so how do you think your music influenced the new generation, this younger generation?
It's an interesting thing to watch because kids come in, they're 11 and 12, and they start off, and it's whatever the flavor of the month is, the Maroon 5 and Blink-182 and kind of the stuff that's on the radio. And then kids become like 13 or 14. I actually had a kid come in and say, hey, have you heard of a band called the Beatles? I said, yeah, I think they crossed my radar someplace. He says, they're really good. Could I learn one of their songs? And I was like, yeah, I think I could probably manifest that in your life. And these kids become aware of classic rock. And it's not just because I'm in my 50s, but it really is quality music. It's withstood the test of time. And, like with the Steve Miller stuff, I tell a lot of these kids, I said, well, I was in the Steve Miller band. It's like, so now it may as well be the Glenn Miller band. But then I play one of the tunes, and they, I know that tune. So then they're impressed. And actually, it's funny because I have kids go home, and I said, well, I was in the Steve Miller band. They actually go home and they check CD credits and they go on the internet and they said, hey, you weren't lying. I said, no. If I was going to lie, I'd say I was in the Rolling Stones, man. I'd really do it up. So. Yeah, these kids are influenced by this stuff sometimes without even knowing it, just from hearing it around the house, from hearing it from their parents. So it's great, because I get to expose them to that stuff, and I get to learn a lot of good new stuff. And
what do you think about the music of today?
Honestly,
yes,
I think most of the stuff you hear on the radio is crap. I think it's terrible. I think American Idol has done a great deal to destroy any integrity that was left in music, and what you hear is homogenized, sort of just, what did I say? Crap.
Oh, crap.
It's crap. Crap is crap. And however, if you go on satellite radio and you check out things like Outlaw Country or some of the alternative stations, the stuff you don't ordinarily hear on the radio, there's some great stuff out there. There are some amazing songwriters, there's some great players, but you don't hear it because it's not safe. Well, here's an example. I had a girl come into the store, amazing singer, and just a beautiful, beautiful girl. Probably looked like to be in her early 20s, and she was doing a bunch of sessions back in Nashville. And I said, why don't you have your own record deal? I said, you're gorgeous, your voice is great. She says, I'm too old. I said, well, how old are you? She says, I'm 23. So that's the way things are right now. They want to get somebody when they're, 15 or 16 years old and, mold them into whatever and then, have them, end up going crazy and shaving their heads,
Wow.
Like Britney Spears.
Yeah.
Perfect example. Britney had some talent, but she just, she had no life. So, and I think that's the way a lot of these kids are going to end up. So.
You said you're from Walnut Creek, just not too far from here, right? You grew up around here. Do you just remember the Summer of Love and 20 years ago or
Absolutely,
30 years ago? You want to share any experiences?
Yeah, I mean, I graduated from high school in 1967, so it was huge in my life. I mean, I remember going out in June of '67, just before I graduated, and snaking out on a school night. And one week, I went to see the Who for $2.50. The next week, I saw Jimi Hendrix opening up. He was the opening band on the bill. So. And that was normal back then. So yeah, I got to see this insanely great music. And when you're in the middle of it, you don't know history's being made, but it was just like I was fortunate to be there because it sort of coalesced what I was going to do with my life. I remember the exact moment. I was in high school. I took my girlfriend at the time to go see a band called the Yardbirds, who were kind of a seminal heavy metal band. And I remember standing, and the guitar players were a guy named Jeff Beck and Jimmy Page. Were both playing guitar in the band. And I just sat there and I watched them, and it was like one of those moments where it's okay. That's what I want to be when I grow up. That's what I'm going to do with my life. So, and that's what happened. Of course, I'm still waiting to grow up, but eventually that'll happen.
You're great. So we're talking about the young kids of the day, the new generation. What message do you have for them, or just your own individual?
What message do I have for kids?
Or your own individual message in general.
I would listen to everybody. Try to keep your ears open and your mouth shut for a while, and then use what you've learned to become your own person. I mean, listen, but don't become a clone. Sort of. I guess you have to be selective about what you actually do. But, ultimately, you need to sing your own song, so.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tracy.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Greg Douglas, the former guitarist with the Steve Miller Band, and you're watching Warning TV.